Welcome to episode 44 of the International Web Effectiveness Podcast. I'm Bill Scully along with Bill Hunt, and today we're going to be talking about selective indexing, SEO in the age of AI search. We're going to be exploring the fundamental change and how we should think about crawling and indexing, and we're going to be discussing a lot of things, including why being crawled does not mean being indexed, the three gates that Bill has put together as a framework, and why every page must pass, and we'll end up with what international and enterprise websites should be doing now. So, Bill, you wrote a really good article that got me thinking. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post from it, but explain to me why you wrote the article, The New Economics of Web Crawling Framework for Selective Content Ingestion 1 year later.
It's a mouthful, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I've really been trying to put on my economist hat lately to try to look at things through a different lens and look at it from both sides of the equation, the crawler ingester side and the business side. And actually, this was a follow-up to an article that I wrote basically the same time last year where I started noticing these, which was an article that I wrote the year prior that was part of a keynote that I gave that basically was whining and ranting that people don't care about being crawled and cleaning up their house, and that at some point, it's going to start costing them. And so that's why I called it The Economics Have Changed, because that's literally the trigger. And I really didn't have a lot of ammunition, especially from an economics perspective previously, and that's what's changed. And I allude to that and I tried to cite different things that have happened, but the big change is all of this AI stuff. Back in the day, and we're talking like the day was like last year, where crawling and ingesting stuff into Google was fairly straightforward. And Common Crawl crawling it so it can be used by all the AI platforms, fairly straightforward. Where things and where economics comes in is the processing cost, the token cost. Obviously, there's storage issue, but it's the actual processing cost to sift through all that stuff and figure out what is worthy of being an answer when somebody asks either in AI overviews or in ChatGPT or Claude or wherever. And that's where really what prompted it, because I was listening to Scott Galloway, his podcast about growth, and they were talking about all these companies, and I saw it in my own portfolio where, when somebody actually said the quiet part out loud that, hey, AI companies may not be making money. They're selling their excess capacity and people aren't using this. And then equally, companies were saying we've exhausted our token budget for the entire year, that it's costing us too much to process information. And simultaneously, Google announced for the first thing ever that they had a negative free cash flow, where they were losing money because of all of the costs of processing things in AI. And you look at ChatGPT and everybody's saying, hey, the cost to process this stuff is too much. I've had 5 of my advisory clients say we've had to cut back on tools because the cost to process this stuff is getting too expensive. And so if you think about that, if you start thinking everybody's talking about it's too expensive to process this, then they'll probably process less. That was the catalyst for the economic side of this. The other one were the signals we were getting, right? We saw back when we had Adam Gent on with his crawling system, and he had noticed in a report that, almost everybody they were reporting data on index rates were dropping. And the index or crawled but not indexed signal had went through the roof. And we didn't really know, we intuitively knew that was either this was non-beneficial content, it was light content, it was duplicative content. We didn't really have something we could apply to it. And then a few people like Marie Haynes and some others started digging in and noticed a correlation in many cases timed with some of the Google events where Google was, especially in Toronto, where a good third of their presentation was talking about additive content or information gain. Now, of course, the search community poo-pooed this. It's like information gain, whatever. Just take my stuff. It's good stuff. I wrote it with AI and puked it out. And, I put blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not demeaning anybody's hard written, purposeful
We
written content, but as a person who travels a lot that has completely stopped looking at travel blogs because all somebody did was literally switch out an image. It's almost the same stuff. There's nothing about their experience or anything inherently, not all, but many are just sort of repurposed or AI written trip reports, right? Even if they did the trip, right? But that's the point. And that's what I found because I was asked to evaluate a website that the client was complaining it wasn't doing well. They weren't my client. And they said, help us. We can't figure out the problem. And when I looked at the GSC index status report, and that we've talked about many times, it's an invaluable report. I looked at the pages that had been crawled but not indexed. It means Google's seen them. And then I noticed there was a pattern that they all had a folder that was unique. And then I took all of them, I put them into Claude, into a skill that I wrote about evaluating them for uniqueness and information gain, or I call it additive content, compared to the website. And it came back and said, these are 100% duplication of content that's on the main page for that location. So it wasn't anything additive. So we don't need it. 100 pages, exactly the same type of information. Again, it was 100 locations. And this was like, services or amenities which were covered on a different page. So Google doesn't need this.
Yeah, this is not anything new. I mean, Google's been telling us forever that, write unique content, write content from your experience. That avoids people from rewriting the first 10 pages into a longer article. Just doing that may create completeness, but it has no information gain.
Right. And, people like, I know Corey's been talking about this with, his crawling, and you know the actual name for it, crawl.
Yeah, cost of retrieval. So, I mean, think in terms of Google and being an engineer. That's what we like to do when we're talking together. Like, how Google's a business. They need to make their processes efficient, and they're going to do what they can to reduce the cost of retrieval. And if stuff is just stuff that's already out there, there's really no reason for them to even look at it.
Exactly. So why now? That was the whole point we're trying to make, right?
Yeah.
So if this has been out there, we've been talking about this for 20 plus years. Corey's been ranting about it. Many people and Google's been talking about it. So what's changed? And the only thing that's really changed, and why are they cracking down now? Right? And it comes back to that token cost, the cost of process. Because if you think about it, if 86%, I think that's the latest number, of most queries in Google return an AI overview, that has to be generated or synthesized. That means they're putting resources against doing that. So they need, if I got, and I don't know the magical number, how many, it's the old Tootsie Roll lollipop question, right? How many licks to get to the center? Is it 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, 1,000 pages before they have enough consensus on an answer? It's whatever that threshold is when they say, I have enough. So if you're the 11th, and in my article, I wrote 11 to N. If I have 10 good sources that I vetted, I got from wherever, I didn't pull the 10 blue links from Google, but I got them from somewhere. Is it the 11th, 12th, 20th, 100th that I say, I no longer need that? I've got everything I need. These are valid sources. And if you're the 11th to N, you may not be considered. But what is that rubric that you've added something to it? This is what you were talking about, your experience, your personal view, maybe going deeper. And this is the dilemma. And so I started folding this into the 3-gate model, which if you go to Google's crawl budget page, it looks frighteningly simple because it's the same thing. I just tried to articulate it into an easier to read model that took it out of the, if you don't have more than 1 million links, this doesn't apply to you. Right?
Yeah, but you need to think like a lawyer, right? Like crawl is not ranking.
Exactly.
So
And
yeah, I'll
Google's told
crawl
us
everything,
this.
and you know what? I won't index it.
That's the point. They used to crawl everything because they didn't know. So there's a model I've been trying to work on that I'm going to say scared, nervous to put out there because I've been working on it for 2 years where I've tried to create a grid of, again, thinking like an engineer. A URL comes into my purview. How do I move it from a list of URLs I just found, right? And if we think about where we get URLs, we get them during crawl, we get them during an XML sitemap, and people can submit them. And well, crawl means we found it somewhere, right? So that's the 3 methods I can ingest these. How do I decide next if I'm limiting resources, which of these? And actually, this is the training course we've been trying to build to teach developers to do this, think like Google, and translate that into building on your website, right? So if you're natively limiting stuff, how do we native limit stuff? If native limiting stuff, how do we, as a website owner, make sure we're not tripping a switch where they exclude us?
Right.
Right. So that's sort of the logic I was trying to build. Then if we pass those tests, all the criteria that I'm going to put it in the next box, which Google tells us to go fetch it. And remember when Danny Sullivan at the conference somewhere at an event in New York, he mentioned Lily Ray's, interview question about, tell me about these steps that Google takes about indexing and retrieving and rendering. And everybody thought it was a simultaneous 1 session adventure, and how the community exploded when they learned that was not true, that I didn't find a web page on a URL on your page and magically crawl it, magically render it, magically dump it into my repository. It's not how it happens. So that's the same thing here, right? So, crawl capacity is too big of a word, right? Do you make it easy for me to get it? And I think in the notes, you actually, I think made it simpler in that, can I get it easy? And I actually tried to put this into a framework. Like if I'm a company and I'm selling products and I have 5 vendors that I can get supplies from, if one can get it to me today, this is why Amazon is winning, right? I can get stuff from the Amazon warehouse that's 10 miles from my house today. That's probably not in stock at Target or Walmart. That's insane. So where am I going to go to order it? I'm going to go to Amazon, despite the fact I want to shop local or I'd like to shop in a physical store. I just know they're probably not going to have it, but I can get it today or at 4 a.m. tomorrow from Amazon.
Yeah, they've reduced the friction, right?
They've reduced the friction.
Yeah.
So they've reduced the friction, right? They make it easy to crawl.
I don't know if for people that haven't read the article, I think it'd be really good to understand your framework. So this is, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's a 3-gate model, right? First is crawl capacity. Can the website serve crawlers effectively? And then crawl demand. Does the search system have a reason to spend resources on the site or URL, which is sort of the feedback loop from the information gain? And then information gain. Does the individual page contribute something that's not already available in the corpus? So if you don't have anything of value, you don't pass the crawl demand. If your crawl, if
2 parts
trying to crawl your site is, slow, is difficult to navigate, you don't pass the first gate. And, it works forwards and backwards. Crawl capacity, crawl demand, and information gain.
And there's a nuance to crawl demand. Is anybody asking for it? Right?
Yeah,
we all use keywords or prompts.
We're
going nuts about, should we write this content to begin with? And we use keywords or whatever we use. I think we're banned from saying keywords nowadays, but we use query data. We use some data to decide if we're going to write content. We do that. So imagine a search engine. Where would you spend your precious resources going after, it's like there was that argument back on some music site. I think it was Spotify. The Star Spangled Banner on a banjo is retrieved once a year, right? So are we going to go get more banjo music, or are we going to get something that people actually want? That's literally what it is. Does our systems tell us, based on query volume, what you have in that, does anybody want it, right? So if you're putting out stuff that's less demand, they may not need it. And then, then the third one is, so can we get into your store to buy it? Do you have the stuff that we want to buy, right? And the third is there anything different than what I can get elsewhere? So do I drive across town to a specialty store, or do I go into Walmart and buy something that maybe has limited? So those are the three things. And if we think about them if you fail any of these gates, you make it hard to crawl, you're slow, I have to unpack this from marketing speak, I'm probably not going to fetch content from you. If you have content that's not in high demand or changes frequently, I'm probably not going to get it from you. And third is, if you're not adding anything to what I already have, or what I'm getting from the other, if I got two sources already, and you've had any of these other barriers and you're not adding anything new, I probably don't need it from you. That's as simple as I can say it. And so if you step back and say, let's go to the first one, that's not an efficient use of my precious server resources, right? And if your content's not changing, and if it's not popular and it's not being additive, then we don't need it. And this was the whole premise, that this is more important now because the cost to process that information is gotten prohibitive, to where the crawlers across the board are going to be more selective. This full stop.
Yeah. And I think this affects hreflang, where, do they really need to have every regional page if they're all exactly the same?
Exactly. And well, so this is the problem. There's a whole nother problem from an hreflang perspective. First off, there is no AI system that uses hreflang. None of them. That is a serving function in Google. So it's not applied anywhere else. The second is this concept that I'm trying to simplify, called canonical tokenization. So let me use my favorite punching bag, Nike. So Nike, 100 plus websites, 37 of them in English, 100% of them exactly the same English, 22 of them have a $ for currency, and the only reference that this page, this particular shoe, is for a particular market, in 22 cases, is that they have a link to the country locator in the bottom that has the country name. That's the only thing that's different, right? So the way AI works, if I come across this page and it's 100% or 99.999% of what I already have, they're going to do what's called canonical tokenization. They're going to collapse the information on, let's say, the UK or the English Liechtenstein page for a particular shoe into the data set of the corpus. And guess what? No fields are going to be changed. Because if somebody does a query for a shoe or a review or whatever, there's nothing material on that page that's any different. Now, we could argue that the number next to the $ is different, so they may pull that in and store that as a price variation. That'd be the only thing. So then when it comes to serving that result, the likelihood that the most dominant page in the world is the page that they're going to show. And we see this. And then we had this discussion previously. Oh, we actually haven't talked since I did my Search Summit conference presentation. So we saw an example there where companies were quicker to update product information, in this case in Norway and in the UAE for a particular product. And so Google was ingesting that into their AI system. And so when people were asking questions about this product, it was talking about it in English, and it had two citations to the right that when you clicked on them, you clicked the first one, they were localized into English. You click it and you went to Norway, or if you click the second one, you went to the UAE, and the pages were in Norwegian and Arabic.
Wow.
And the reason why they were shown is because they had the newer information which matched the person's prompt. The US page was still all of the emotional content and the marketing content, whereas these other ones had the exact technical specification. And so what Google did in the result, it made it in English because that was my desired language. It had the 2 entries that had been localized, but when I clicked into them, I went to the local market.
And this was in the AI overview?
It's an AI overview.
And the AI overview main body had the newer information, but you didn't know where it was coming from. You just saw the 2 references.
There was no link to it.
Yep.
It just described it, but there was 2 citations with images to the right that went to Norway in Norwegian and the UAE in Arabic, because when we looked at the dates, when I was trying to unravel this, how is this happening? And it turned out when I looked at the last update date for both of these pages, they had been updated. When I compared it to the US page, it didn't even have the same information. It wasn't old information, it was actually new information. And so that's what's happening is the newer information was in those markets. So because my query was a little more modern than what the US page had, it took me to those other markets. But what it did is it consolidated all that information into the answer. It gave me the answer and cited 2 pages in other markets. And this is that canonical tokenization where it collapses it, even across languages, into a single corpus.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, they was not just the AI overviews, but they're saying that the search results are becoming agentic as well.
And so that's the problem with all of this, right? Is that, and so that's hence the reason for the change and why this is more important than it has been is because the economics of processing this data means they're going to be exponentially more selective of what they're intaking. So that's why we see the crawled not indexed rates going through the roof. That's why we say the aware not crawled, that's the other one that Google was talking about recently, is people are saying, I see a lot where you're aware of the URL, but you haven't crawled it yet. And what they're saying, this was the other update to their crawl budget page, is we start new content with a very conservative view. Let us see, do we have any other signals across the world or across the ecosystem that tell us whether this is worth our time or not?
Yeah.
Like we've seen this when we relaunched the site, right? It might come in, get 10 URLs, 20 URLs, then it takes a little bit longer because it's running it through the rubric. Should we go get more?
So let's talk about some of the evidence behind this stuff. So Adam Gent, our friend, who's previously on a podcast of Indexing Insight, reported that more than 25% of approximately 2 million monitored URLs were removed from Google's index, not just, not AI or not being picked up by AI during a period in late 2025. And when they dug into it, what they found was the removed pages had little or no recorded search performance. So again, this is an indication of, why keep it if it has no value? And that, the question is, if removing a substantial number of index pages produces no measurable traffic loss, what did indexing those pages accomplish for the website or the search engine to begin with?
Exactly. And what did it get for you? What did it get for them? And, we're in the SEOs, we're hoarders. We have these arguments 2-3 times a week about what to do with, pages that are old, and let's stuff it in this folder and let's do this with it and let's keep it because somebody might know what we said on, a press release, 27 years ago or whatever. There's an argument to keep it, and you can keep it. This is the thing. You can keep it. Just don't expect it to be indexed. Same thing. You can have 50 gazillion pages with 42 parameters. Just don't expect all of those iterations to be indexed. They don't need it. Yeah. So that was sort of almost the canary in the coal mine, right? It's telling us, oh, we got to pay attention. That's why we had Adam on and we were talking about it. The second one was Google's update of their crawl documentation, which they seem to be editing almost weekly now.
Yeah.
Right? So they tell you explicitly, not every crawled page will be indexed. If it doesn't meet some threshold of value, we're not going to do it. They tell us now we have a conservative crawl. Before we would come in and we'll just, we'll eat at the buffet. We'll take everything on the buffet back to our table and try to eat it.
Yeah,
They're not
news
going to do
sites would
that.
get gobbled up immediately.
Not anymore. Now, if you're a 100-page website, this really is probably not applying to you as much. But the rest will. Then it's things like, how unique is it? Do we need the 47th version of this? And this is another thing, I think another reason why they're tying back to this and why Google's been vocal at their search summits is if you look at the MO or the operating model of nearly every geo tool, what do? You put in a set of prompts, they run the prompt, they scrape the answer, the citation, they look at who's cited, they then go fetch their pages. So this, you alluded to this earlier. People used to scrape the top 10, put that into a page and load that. Well, we're doing the same thing now at scale with AI. We not only get the top 10, but we get everybody that's cited and referenced. We bring that in. We sort of, put it in a nice little cocktail shaker, shake it up, and then we puke it out. And what we've got now is a Me Too page that matches everybody else that was in the citation block. Did we add anything to that? Right? We're on parity with what they cited. Is there a need? Is being on parity to what they already have? Going back to gate 3. If we're equal to, and maybe added a little bonus material that we scraped or AI generated to what the citation already has, is that enough for AI to change its mind about us? Because if we back out to my eligibility gates, if we think about those, there's multiple criteria. Did you meet that set of criteria to even be considered? So if you only got a Me Too parity in terms of content, but there's no Reddit mention or there's no research mention, if you haven't been cited anywhere authoritative, or, if you didn't break down that, here's a feature function set or any of those supplementary signals that you deserve an answer, especially if there's one of these conditional prompts like best, fastest, most efficient. If you've put in a scoring rubric, if you fail any of the scoring rubric, having parity content like that doesn't help you. And I think this is Google trying to preempt everybody trying to get on parity to people that are already cited.
Right. And when we were talking earlier, you brought up something I had missed completely. Google updated the crawl documentation to suggest adding a 304 not modified response. That is like unheard of. Like, I mean,
So they're not
nobody
us
runs
to
Screaming
tell them.
Frog. Nobody runs Screaming Frog to check for 304s.
Because they're not really maintaining that in state, right? You could serve a 304 to Screaming Frog, but that would mean that we stored it, right? So here's the interesting thing. This is happening already at your CDN. If you're on a CDN, they're doing it for you. In last year, I wrote about that Cloudflare had introduced crawler hints, right? And crawler hints was essentially serving a 304 to tell, because when the request comes in for the page and you've already requested that, it can tell it 304 not modified, right? And so why did they do that? Well, at the time it was 52%. They just come out and said it's now 55% of every request coming into Cloudflare for Google, a page by Google, has not been changed since the last time Google requested it. So if Google got it on Monday and you haven't changed it, and this is a material change. So for those of you that think, let me go change the date, let me go swap paragraphs, let me use this plugin that I just saw that swaps paragraphs every third day of the month. None of that crap works because we're looking at material change, right? Changing a price every day is not a material change, right? And I don't have a quantifiable definition of material change. That's just has enough on the page change to warrant that. Cloudflare can tell you, they have documented what that change is, that you've changed significant portions of the page. And it's really the same thing that triggers whether they cache it or not. All right. So if you think about that, and if they got 20% of the web and the other CDNs are doing something similar, and then we got Bing doing this with with their index now, everybody's already putting the native throttle in place. And Google's just saying, help us out because we'd rather go get this stuff that has changed instead of fetching this stuff that hasn't.
Right.
So that's the benefit. So that to me was probably the biggest signal because what's the best thing? Like I have a whole article ready to go on this. It's how SEOs, or it's sort of one of these sort of sarcastic things on, how SEOs are Google's PR/unpaid workforce. Because if they want material change, they just throw a carrot out to the SEO community and we take it and run with it. Like mobile. They believe more people were searching on mobile. So who was the driver of making things mobile friendly? The SEO community. Who was it for AMP? The SEO community. Who has it been for Core Web Vitals? The SEO community. Because developers still don't care about Core Web Vitals because people are on, they're on gigabit internet systems in the United States, so nobody cares about bandwidth, right? But all of these things are driven by the SEO community. So that makes sense why they're pushing that out there. There's no rubric, there's no scorecard. That's why it's not going to get adopted. But to me, that's a massive signal that they don't want to ingest things that haven't been changed. And the fact that the CDN is doing it is something we need to be mindful of. That's another signal. One of the other ones that I put out there is what happened in Germany with the Munich court ruling that's making Google liable for synthetic answers. So the 10 blue links, they're just extracting what people had on their web page. When they synthesize an answer, it's got to be, they're holding them liable. So whether this gets wider traction or not, but if I were Google, I would be exponentially more, critical of what I'm using and the quantity of things I'm using to synthesize my answer. Any AI platform.
Yeah,
this isn't
sure.
just to Google, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I'm going to limit what I ingest. So that's another native governance that they may put in place to only get the more reputable thing.
Right. Somehow they're determining authority and trustworthiness. If
And
an AI
accuracy and
platform
relevance.
can be held responsible for a generated claim,
then they're going to reduce what they bring in and use. So again, if you're a Me Too and you're not adding anything and you're not validating it, whether that be with schema or structured data or some other cross validation, I think what's going to happen is rather than going to some review site and bringing in information from an affiliate, they want to go to the source. But why don't I always go to the source to get information about the source? Well, because the source often couches that information. Like I wrote the other day in an article, in my Search Engine Journal article, I wanted the miles per gallon for the Ford F-150. Ford wasn't in the AI overview, nor was it in any answer because they bury that. It was Edmunds and car and truck review sites that surfaced it because they're not afraid of showing that information.
I want to remind people of our free Facebook group where we use that as an opportunity to discuss these things, and you can ask any questions you want. You can also suggest ideas for upcoming podcasts. You can find that by searching International Web Mastery Free Group.
So why isn't Ford there? Because it's buried. It's not the emotional content. So is what's going to show up for an answer like that in the future? Maybe nothing. Maybe they will result to the 10 blue links. And again, who's the loser in this? It's when the brand doesn't show up. And then, then I went into like, what are some of the criteria that they may use? I think there was 9 criteria that I think if they're going to be more selective what they crawl and what they ingest, it may fall across those criteria.
Yeah, those were information gain, use demand. You talked about that before. I think part of that could be, internal links and external links to the page to help demonstrate interest. Frequency of change. I've seen people write case studies recently where they'll update pages and jump from position 6 or 7 to 4 and all the other things you talked about, the token efficiency. One thing we didn't talk about was structured signals. do the headings, canonicals, schema, does all of that and content organization reduce interpretation costs? So, as the search engine engineers patents on this, they'll ingest the headings and the first line and determine almost immediately, is this paragraph going to support the heading, and is this worthy of my continued ingestion?
We're also
It's
seeing
getting so complicated.
the research about what's extracted out of the DOM.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at Google's new agentic scorecard, right, which is causing chaos about the LMS.txt file, but they talk about how parsable is the DOM. And I've been looking at that, and I see like I was looking at a page, and they had all of their like if then fail rules. Like one example was they were selling some properties, and they had 7 properties for sale listed, but above it in the DOM was the error message that there's no properties available. So like you said, as Google was extracting this, it was coming across the no properties available. It was ignoring the rest. And even though there was 7 available for sale, it ignored them and pulled that into the snippet and then hit it with a soft 404. And they're like, why is this a soft 404? And then we started looking, and we saw and then we did a site colon, and we saw that Google had pulled up the no properties available. And that was in a warning statement that was supposed to be technically off page, but that the developer was lazy and pulled it into the DOM. And so that was seen before the actual listing. So this gets back to the depth of crawl. What is it fetching? So we're back to all of the old school gorpiness of where is the content in relation to the overall build of the page. We're also seeing things like back to your structured signals. This same page, 5 of the H tags were all referencing things that were external, like mortgage tools or distance tools. And it's like, but then they were H2s that were technically links off the page to third party or other tools. So the very thing that they seem to be extracting to understand what follows, like you said, the sentence or whatever beneath it, were all sort of red herrings. They weren't really things that were adding any value. And the team was arguing, well, they need to be there because they're viable things. Yeah, but don't wrap them in an H2.
Right.
Put them in wrap the CSS, get the same font, get the same height, and that just don't wrap them in an H2 because there's actually nothing underneath them. And they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. So again, we need to think about this stuff creatively because that's what it's extracting. And then I think commercial impact, right? And this is a two-way street. Is there commercial benefit to the ingester, right? In the case of Google, can we put ads against it? Is it going to get people to come there? In the case of AI, is it something we can potentially sell? Is it something we can package? Is it going to increase loyalty to use us because of the quality of the answers? And then the last one I put in was this legal and licensing clarity. I mean, can we extract this without getting sued? I mean, you look at what Cloudflare is trying to do with the robots text. If you look at it, they're actually trying to make that a pseudo contract that says if you visit this robots text file, you're accepting our entrance and extraction and crawling and indexing, contract. And that's why I see a reduction in requests of the robots text by AI bots because, I don't think there's enough precedent for that. There is no precedent, but I don't know that it's going to hold up in court that you called agentic or OpenAI, you fetched my Common Crawl fetched my robots text. Therefore, you agreed to my terms to visit my site. I don't know that that's going to hold up.
People are creating unique terms and conditions on.
If you look at one that's generated by by Cloudflare, it literally tells you. It's written as if it's a contract, and that if you fetch it,
seen that. Okay, I'll have to
so if you look at one where it's been done, or if you just go, I'll put the link in the show notes to their page where they're writing it. And this is the other thing too, is if you were to set up on Cloudflare today and you're a lower tier, automatically all the bots are blocked. And you can click a button where you use their robots text file. But here's the crazy thing, Bill. The robot's text is actually seen after the gate at the CDN.
Yeah, I've seen that where it's being blocked and it's not in the robot's text file.
Because it's in the WAF rules, what they can do. And they break them out, not only which AI bot, but the purpose of the bot. That it's for training or RAG, or if it's a bot, if it's one of their agents created within like a Claude skill. And so, but look at that. And that's why we're starting to see some of these AI agents, and especially some of the second tier ones, are not fetching robots text because they don't want to have a record of them fetching it and an argument that you read it, therefore, but there's no acceptance of terms. It's a one-way thing, but it's sort of a pseudo contract so that's this clarity, right? And remember when they put up the toll booth that they were going to regulate who could come through the content. That's when I said I built a whole back logic on how AI will make a decision. Do I actually need your crappy content that I got to pay 16 cents to fetch? And if I've already fetched it, do I need to come get it a second time, right? So why am I spending $1.50 to fetch content 10 times that I already have?
Right.
So that's why we need to think broader about this, because, we get all giddy about, I'm going to be able to sell, my crappy blog content to somebody at 5 cents a visit. Well, once they have it, they don't need to visit again. What did you materially change on that content that they're going to be willing to pay X cents to get it? This is why publishers are saying we're just blocking Google and all the bots, because we've retooled our business models around loyalty and apps and tools and actually make something people want to use instead of just being a traffic arbitrator. And so they're saying, well, we actually don't need Google and its crappy, 19% of our total traffic.
Yeah.
So that's the reality of this, right? And I think this opens up some of the things that you captured, is the thing is like, it's all about value to everybody, right? Is it their purpose? Is there value in them coming and getting it better than what they already have? And things like that. I think it just, makes sense.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. I'm sure that most people listening are probably struggling with the reduction of pages being indexed. I think we've covered pretty well the reasons that could be. But let's go through some things that people could do today.
First thing I think everybody should do is, if you have Screaming Frog, I don't know if any other crawlers do it, but Screaming Frog is painless. Get Screaming Frog or use Screaming Frog and then connect it to your Search Console account and crawl your site. Now, if you have a larger site, break it up into 1,800 URL chunks, or because you can get 1,000, or I think the max is 2,000, right, through the API. So chunk it up, run each of these a day, and look to see how many Google has said that they're aware of and haven't indexed, or they're aware of, or that they've crawled but not indexed, and see if there's a pattern. And to your point, Bill, if you deem those pages and be very critical of your definition of these are critical pages. Just because it's on your website doesn't mean it has any value. I'm sorry to tell you your baby's ugly, but really put a tough rubric.
If your site went down, would it matter in the world?
Exactly. Is anybody going to care but you? Right? So if any of those have those two criteria, then take a look at that. But if we go back to gate number 1, log into Search Console today. This is free, doesn't cost you anything other than looking at that table. Look at that rejected to indexed ratio. If it's anything more than, I'm just going to say it, 1-to-1, meaning you should have 0 errors, but that's impossible, almost impossible. Let's say you have 100 errors and you have 10,000 pages. That's not bad. But also look at the errors, right? If you've got legit things like you block stuff, I wish Google, if we're blocking it, but they're trying to tell us you blocked something, did you do this on purpose?
Totally agree.
Are these 404s on purpose? So you can kick some of those out. But when they're talking about redirects, or they're talking about, canonical issues, when they're talking about those that we talked about, that these are aware of but not indexed, crawled but not indexed, and especially if you run the API or you use Adam Gent's tool, it will tell you how many days since when they became aware of it, they visited it to now, right? Look at those ratios. And then remove anything that's broken. Fix 404s, fix redirects.
Especially from the sitemaps.
From the sitemap. So here's two things, right? I just wrote a guide for a company that was arguing with me on this. And I'm like, okay, if Bubba Joe on his blog mistyped your URL, the only way to fix that broken link is to tell Bubba Joe to fix it. If you have a 404 on your site where you're linking to it, you can fix that. If you have a redirect in your XML sitemap, your HTML sitemap, and God forbid your menu, like I had one yesterday, 3 days ago, the company had 4,000 broken 404s. That's how the report showed it. And it turned out it was 4,000 pages with a URL in the header that was broken. So it's technically a broken header link shown in the report 4,000 times. So how long does it take you to open? Some companies, it may take months, but open a header, fix that URL, save it, refresh. From that point on, the 4,000 404s go away because they can't be 404 anymore. All right? So fix those things that you can fix. And then same things like redirect chains. I don't know if you saw that Google said, if you've got a site search and people are spamming the hell out of site search where they're using the parameter variable and they take it, it's all the porn and pharma and that. Once they know you have certain site search functionality, what they do is take that base query with the site search call, the ampersand, they put their spam string next to it and then run a bot to call it. And all of those pages become real. And they ingest it. They build a fake sitemap, they inject it into your site, and Google crawls up.
Huh, I haven't heard that.
And so if you read about this, it's the site search spam that they're saying your site search pages do not need to be indexed. So it's an exploit that's going around that can be solved by simply blocking your site search. And again, SEOs are like, no, that's a gold mine. Google gets all kinds of goodness. The AI bros are like, no, let them into that. Please let them in. That's into the bowels of the organization. And Google's like, no, we don't need that crap.
Well, yeah.
So those are the things. Fix all this stuff.
So there's the second step where if people are searching for stuff on your site, odds are they don't know how to navigate to it. So fix that or create content for it. But that's another friction story.
Yep. And then the other one we'll put into the show notes is for the information gain side of this. If you've run the crawl we talked about and you have a bunch of pages or just extract it from Search Console for free, all the URLs that Google said that they've crawled but didn't index, if there's a pattern across them, let's say they in the same folder or the same page type, then there's a prompt that I wrote that leverages Marie Haynes's similar prompt that you take all the URLs, you put them in a CSV or Excel, you load them into AI with mine, and I give a link to Marie's prompt, but whichever one you want to use, run this prompt, and what it's going to do is look for information gain first on your website because Google telling you they didn't want it because for whatever reason. So it's looking for light content, duplicate content, junk content. You'll see the rubric that she and I wrote. But run that, and if it tells you that there's no information gain, what I wrote was, tell me the page that it's duplicate of, or tell me why there's a lack of information gain. So it will tell you the problem. And then you can task somebody to fix that. So if it is duplicate of another page, and that page is indexed, then can you join them, right? If it's 100% or 80, I think mine gives you an actual quantity duplication. So, and I think if it's over 85, you make that A/B choice, merge it in or add to it. And then if you're merging it, then obviously you want a 301 redirect it up into the other page. So go through those steps to add information gain, and don't just use a tool to figure out, hey, what do the other people have? Sit down and say, what's my claim to fame to this? And how does what's on this page, how do I relate to it? How does my business do it? How does my business apply it? How does my business think differently? And add some of that content. And that's going to help make it truly different if it's an external lack of information gain.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, before approving a page, you want to ask, what's the reader going to know or be able to do after reading the page that they couldn't obtain from existing results?
Exactly.
Add value. Add value. And it could be proprietary data. It could be interviews. It could be your experience, examples, original examples. It could be evidence, and you could provide tools as well to help people do what your page is talking about. That
But
seems
the
to
one
be
I
a new
always like
thing
to come
now.
back to is Gundog Supply,
Is what?
right? Gundog Supply,
Okay.
right? So they sell all kinds of hunting dog stuff, collars and remotes and trackers and training dummies and all that, similar to some of the people you work with that sell different supplies and components. And what most people do, which you break them of, is most people take what's on the box label, what they get in the spec sheet, and they put it on the website, and that's good. What I like about Gundog Supply is, in addition to that, they put their own stamp on it. Like, there's two brothers, there's Rob and Steve. Steve goes out and hunts and runs his dog and trains his dog, and he puts his commentary. Not just jamming it in an FAQ, he literally adds to what was on the box. And then they add videos and they add to it. So it's not exactly what's on the Amazon listing. It's not exactly what's on the manufacturer webpage, but they've literally added their real world experience. And if you're working with like a pool supply company, right? And especially if they're in New England, what do we put, what chemical composition work best in New England where we've got rain one day and 100-degree weather the next day, and we've got green stuff and blue stuff and purple stuff happening in our pool? Whatever it is, same thing with grass types or sprinkler systems or any of this stuff. Instead of just saying, hey, we service sprinkling systems, then what do you do? When do I do my seasonal switchover? What does that entail? Why do I need to do it? And again, not just putting it into an FAQ, which there is no FAQ rich snippet anymore, but let's add to what everybody else says about why you need this kind of grass if you're in New England, which is actually 8 states and a gazillion miles. If you're a Connecticut landscaper, give me something about Connecticut landscaping, that type of thing, whatever it may be. And if this is your business, there's no better source of information about your business. And this, like you said, the proprietary knowledge. The knowledge you have just needs to get out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah.
Easier said than done for most businesses, but hey, get an AI recorder and record into it, and whatever, while you're walking.
That's a great idea. You can get one
mowing
of those.
Somebody's damn grass, yap into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I use audio pen. Right?
Yeah.
When I'm on the treadmill, I use audio pen on my phone and I just talk into it. And then when I'm done, there's the version I have formats that I can say, do I want this to be like an article? Do I want this to be a rant? Do I want this to be, a newspaper type post? Or just notes? And then, so I do that when something pops into my head. And imagine you're on the drive to a job site, or you've got a new set of chemicals. I'm not talking about doing a production class video. I'm just simply talking about it. You got your earbuds in and you can say, well, this particular thing, and then dump it into AI, let it clean it up and say, hey, I need this chunked out for 5 things on, I don't know, whatever it is, pool chlorine for Connecticut pools, right? Pontificate while you're driving, safely, of course, hands-free. But, those kind of things, use your downtime or your working time or the time when you can act like an idiot and talk to yourself to record some of this stuff, let AI process it, and then dump it into the page to be additive.
Yeah. All right. I think we nailed it.
That was a lot.
Anything you want to finish up with?
No, I think that's good. Reduction in crawl is here to stay. And the more we can sort of make it easy to crawl and value to crawl, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, so I encourage everybody to go check out Bill's article, The New Economics of Web Crawling, a Framework for Selective Content Ingestion, and that's on billhunt.com.
Yep.
that right?
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Good idea. Okay. We hope you're finding the value in our conversations. If you've made it this far, I'm sure you're enjoying the show. We'd really, really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. We also want to hear from you. Your feedback helps motivate us to keep making these podcasts and plan future episodes. And tell us what you're thinking so that we can answer your questions. And I think we'll call that a wrap.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, this is Bill Scully. I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training course called Demystifying Hreflang. It includes 6 modules and is over an hour long with a quiz at the end of each module. You can find it at internationalwebmastery.com. Hope to see you there.